Let's talk about politics. Or rather, in this video, let's talk about different forms of government and what you can do to make the government of your fantasy or sci-fi world something other than an all-powerful king that makes all of the decisions. Nothing wrong with monarchy as such, but let's make it a little bit more interesting, shall we? I will cover different forms of government, different versions of where the power comes from, and how it can change hands. I'll also talk about how you, as the world builder, can make the choice of what best fits your story. Let's start by talking about different forms of government. Monarchy is the most common one used in fantasy. One person rules, they have advisors to help them, and the rule is usually hereditary. The firstborn son inherits the throne, or if you're a bit more daring, a daughter can do it. Like I said, there's nothing inherently wrong with this. There's a reason it's standard, everyone understands it, so there's less exposition for you to deal with, and you can just go straight into telling your story. So of course it is a perfectly reasonable choice to decide to have a king or queen rule in a straight-up monarchy. You don't have to justify it in any way, but I do advise you to make sure that it is a choice and not just something that happens, which is good advice for anything in your world building or writing in general. If your story is about the ruling class, there are some obvious reasons why you might want to make that ruling class a bit different. It could allow you to have a twist on the story beyond nobles scheming or a regular old coup. I'm not saying that coups are inherently boring, but they could be spiced up a bit. Even if your story is not about the ruling class, there are reasons why you might want to do something different, if nothing else just to give the world some extra flavor and depth. And you don't have to do anything extraordinary either. You might have a good reason to have a monarchy in your world, but there are different kinds of monarchies as well. Elective monarchy, for example, where the rule is not hereditary, but instead the next monarch is chosen by someone, or several someones. This means that a future ruler has to please certain people in order to be elected. It's not just automatic. And this might be the people, the current ruler, the nobles, or some other group. We'll get back to that. The person elected could be anyone, too. It could be the current ruler's child, or sibling, or nibbling, or maybe it's someone from a different noble family, a wealthy merchant, whoever wins a duel or a tournament, passes tests, or just a random person off the street. If you don't want a monarchy, there are many other options as well. Any kind of oligarchy where a group of privileged people rule rather than an individual. For example, an aristocracy where some noble families rule, a theocracy where the rulers come from the church, a stratocracy where the military rules, a plutocracy where the richest rule, and so on. Or it could be farmers, teachers, miners, sailors, left-handed people, or literally any group as long as you can explain why they are respected enough that people will listen to them. Farmers provide food, teachers provide knowledge, miners are brave and strong, sailors are adventurous, left-handed people are chosen by God, for example. Anything that fits in your world and your society. And of course, it's not all nobles, all farmers or sailors that rule, but you have to be in this group to rule. And even if you don't rule, belonging to this group will give you status. Note that in this form of government, the elective monarchy, oligarchy, and the different form that it takes, these people are not elected by the general public, because then we're moving into democracy, which is of course also something to look into. Remember that there are many different forms and versions of democracy as well. Common in our world is representative democracy, where representatives are elected that can make decisions on behalf of the people. But there's also direct democracy, where there is a government, but they don't make decisions. Decisions are made by people voting directly on laws and other things that need to be decided, and the government is just there to administrate, organize, and act on the decisions of the people. There are many, many more different versions of government than the ones I've mentioned so far, but if you want more inspiration, I will direct you to Wikipedia. They have an excellent list where you can go for inspiration. There's a link in the description. Also, don't forget anarchy. That is also worth considering. Maybe you don't need a government at all. But say you do choose to have a government, the next question I'd ask is who put them in charge? Or allowed them to take charge? Officially, with monarchies and other hereditary rule, there are some common themes. A god granted them power, or they or their ancestors did something remarkable to earn the power, slayed a dragon, defeated a tyrant, led the people to the land from somewhere else. Or they just have the power and no one questions how or why. But that's the official story, and behind the scenes, there is always more going on. Why does this person or this group of people, this family, have power? What powerful organization do they have behind them? The church, the merchants, the military, and why has this organization decided to support them? What do they get in return? It's usually money or power, or both. Tyrants often rule by fear, but fear alone is not enough to hold power. They can instill fear in everyone, of course, but there have to be some people that also get rewarded for their cooperation in some way. One person cannot rule an entire nation unless they are all-powerful and all-knowing, and thus an actual god. If your ruler is a god, all other rules kinda go out the window. But if they're a person, or even a group of people, they need other people who are willing to actively work for them, to do things like upholding the law, in places where the ruler can't be. Among many other things, which I'll get to in another video. All rulers need people like this, and these people need motivation to work for them. Be that a salary, the feeling of power over other people, or assurance that the ruler won't randomly kill them if that's a hobby they otherwise have. In a democracy, it's more clear why the ruler is in power. They've been elected. It's worth considering who gets to vote. What are the requirements in terms of age, citizenship, fortune, level of schooling, and so on? Definitely let me know below if you want me to make another video specifically on democracies or elections in terms of world building. Now, let's jump to the opposite. What happens if people don't like the ruler? What are some ways for power to change hands? Are there, first of all, legal ways to depose a ruler or a government? Of course, in a democracy, they probably hold regular elections, but there might also be ways for the power to shift between elections. No confidence votes, for example, or if the head of the government dies, what happens then? In monarchies and other hereditary forms of government, it might be that the next heir can challenge the ruler or otherwise legally take over before that ruler dies, or maybe the ruler can choose to step down. Or maybe the current ruler could be declared incompetent by a council or something and be stripped of their power. That could, of course, be exploited to illegally seize power, but at its core, it could still be legal. Otherwise, there are always the illegal options, which are so plentiful that I am not going to bother trying to list them. Again, I will instead recommend Wikipedia and its list of revolutions and rebellions. Look there if you need inspiration and see if you can figure out a few ways that the power has shifted in the past in your world. Was there an industrial revolution that brought down the old nobility when the workers realized that they held the power? A bloody uprising when the peasants got sick of the overtaxing and ruthless violence from the ruling class? Was there a natural disaster that decimated the population and created a power vacuum that someone had to step up to fill? The reason I recommend thinking about this, or one of the reasons, is that the current rulers are likely aware of how and why power has shifted before, and might be trying to do things to make sure it doesn't happen again. If starvation has been a problem that brought down governments before, they might be very focused on making sure that everyone can eat. If merchants were the ones staging a coup earlier, they might be very tightly controlled now to make sure it doesn't happen again, and so on. And I want to be clear that the power has likely shifted many times in the past. I've said it before, but fantasy writers have a tendency to create very static worlds where countries exist for millennia and the same royal family has always ruled. That is a highly unlikely scenario. In our world, the oldest royal family that has ruled uninterrupted is the Imperial House of Japan. They've been on the throne for at least 1,500 years, maybe as long as 2,500, although historical evidence on that is sketchy. And one of the reasons why they have been on the throne for so long is that for relatively large swatches of time in Japan's history, they had no power or riches whatsoever, so there was no reason for anyone to try to take their place. Other royal families are generally much younger. The House of Bernadotte, the royal family in Sweden, has only been on the throne for about 200 years. So it's very unlikely that a dynasty rules uninterrupted for even one millennium, let alone several. That said, even if they have, even if the dynasty is several thousand years old, power will still have shifted between family members. Usually legally, probably, but on occasion, illegally. A child, sibling, cousin, or whatever, who took power that didn't necessarily belong to them, according to rules and traditions. Doesn't interrupt the dynasty, but it's still a shift in power. So how has power switched hands before in your world? Have rulers been deposed, killed, exiled, forced to step down, and who caused it? A family member, the nobles, the church, the people, or the gods? I do want to point out that if your book is not about a shift in power, you obviously don't need all of these details. As always, you should only bother with the aspects of this that seems relevant and useful to you. As for what exactly to take and how to use it, that depends. Does your story have nothing to do with the ruling class? You just want a different form of government to deepen your world building? Then you probably only need a surface level understanding of the government. Will the power, on the other hand, shift hands during the course of the story? Then you probably need more, especially if the power shift is pivotal to the story. So there are some questions to ask yourself before you start world building the entire history of the nation and its power structures. How much space will this take up in your story? Does it matter how this family got the throne 400 years ago? Is it relevant what negotiations went into forming the current government? Do you need to know what exactly the church gets in exchange for supporting the emperor? As always, the only one who can answer those questions is you. If you thought we were done with governments now, think again. I have barely touched upon what governments actually do. In fantasy, governments and kings usually seem to have a very limited number of duties. It's mostly war and taxes, maybe some foreign relations of a more peaceful kind, often involving a strategic marriage, which may or may not be peaceful for the parties involved, but usually involves fewer people than a war does. But there is so much more you could give the ruling body to do if you wanted to add some extra spice. That's a future video though, so don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss it. In the meantime, YouTube has decided that you want to watch this next. Or you can check this out. Thank you for watching, be safe, I will see you next time.